I'm really almost overwhelmed by the cover up of it and by the people I know who participated in that. And I'll just name two of them. One is Bill Barr, who's the two-time Republican Attorney General, whose father, by the way, started Jeffrey Epstein's career. His father, Donald Barr, was a former OSS CIA officer. In the files, I should also say that Jeffrey Epstein describes Bill Barr, the former AG, as, quote, CIA. Jeffrey Epstein privately says this guy's CIA. Bill Barr covered up Epstein's murder. He was clearly murdered in federal detention. Barr said out loud, we got to make sure everyone thinks this is a suicide. So why isn't he being asked about this? And the second is Mike Pompeo. And Mike Pompeo was caught plotting to murder Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks. Why is this significant? Well, because it was WikiLeaks that made that first tranche of emails available to the public. And it was Julian Assange who said on camera, basically said, my source, he didn't say this, he didn't say my source, but he heavily suggested in an interview with Dutch television, my source was Seth Rich, the DNC staffer who was found murdered on the street in Washington in a so-called robbery where nothing was taken from him. That investigation was taken over by the FBI. What? Why? And Assange goes on Dutch television and says, I can't say who my sources are, but they face great risks. You can pull up the interview right now and look at it. Mm-hmm. And then he points to Seth Rich. And the interviewer's like, wait, are you saying Seth Rich was murdered for this? And Assange is like, look, I can't tell you who my sources are, but my sources take great risks. Seth Rich just got murdered. I mean, that couldn't be clearer, right? It was right after that Julian Assange was incarcerated, first in an embassy in London and then in Belmarsh prison, never charged with a crime. And that was pushed by CIA and Mike Pompeo. And it's like, wait a second. Shouldn't someone ask Mike Pompeo? Like, what is this? What is this? These are real allegations, they're credible allegations. And rather than follow up, you're punishing the guy who brought them to light. Tell us how that works, Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo's like wandering free. And no one asks him about this. Like, what is going on, Ian Carroll?
Every time I talk about this story, every aspect of the story from Pizzagate to Epstein, everything in between, I always have to try not to get angry because it's when you think about, especially for me, the cover up, it makes me so furious how regular Americans are going to jail over like smoking a joint or going to jail over like paying taxes that are getting sent overseas anyways, or going to jail over a parking ticket they can't afford, whatever it is, this madness in this country where we are lawfared to death, but these obvious criminals and these people that we at least have obvious questions for are just walking free. And you bring up two really great points that, I mean, in both cases, I think it's obvious that those actions are being taken on behalf of whatever criminal organizations or happenings are being exposed. For example, in those email dumps that Seth Rich probably leaked, because it wasn't just Pizzagate stuff. It was also all sorts of Benghazi stuff, all sorts of Hillary Clinton stuff, all sorts of other really serious stuff that also was never asked of the appropriate parties. But I mean, when you start talking about who's still walking free that we should be asking questions of, and we're looking at the Epstein investigation, that list immediately grows to like 100 miles long. And we got in one of the document drops that happened a couple weeks ago, and then we re-corroborated it multiple times since then. We got a list of 10 co-conspirators that they have had for years from one of their old investigations that just never happened because Kash Patel has been telling us there are no co-conspirators. There is no organization. It was just him alone. But we've got a document saying that they had 10 co-conspirators, one of whom was Leslie Wexner. They're named. And that the list is long. Like there's pilots, we know their names, Larry Visosky. There's 3 different pilots. There's a bunch of other madams like Ghislaine Maxwell, but assistants that were helping to recruit girls. There's a bunch of other people that were trafficking models and bringing models in and out. There's just this there's an enormously long list of people in various roles all around Epstein that we know full well were at the very least deeply suspiciously involved, where they should be asked some very serious questions. I mean, right up to Ehud Barak. who by my accounting looks like the handler of Epstein. He certainly looks like we have all these emails from both Ehud Barak's email server now and from Jeffrey Epstein's trove of documents that corroborate them doing what looks like intelligence operations all around the world and in the United States. So there's just an endless number of people that, like you were saying earlier, that we could at least investigate because it's in the name, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And they keep on giving us this line as though like, well, we've got emails, but it's not illegal to party with Jeffrey Epstein. And it's like, we're not asking you to read the emails. We're asking you to investigate all of the myriad suspicious things that are documented here in these files and emails. And instead of getting investigation, we're getting what looks like cover up, denial, distraction, anything but investigation. And it kind of makes you wonder why.
Well, it definitely makes you wonder why. And part of it is the political dynamic, which, poisons everything. And Trump is obviously sensitive to like partisan traps after the Russian nonsense, which was a lie. Russiagate was a lie. By the way, Russiagate was constructed, in my view, in part to cover up the origin of the DNC emails in 2016 and the John Podesta Gmail dump in 2016. Neither of which was done by Russia. Clearly, there's a lot more there. We're not allowed to ask questions about Seth Rich. I don't know why. Seth Rich's parents don't own that story. I feel so sorry for them, of course, but I'm an American citizen, and if someone is murdered on the street in Washington, we all have an interest in asking, what was that? That's not an attack on his memory. It's a demand for justice in the name of every single American, not just his family. They don't get to shut it down, sorry. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like all of this gets to the foundation of our system, which is justice. Is every citizen treated the same under the law or not? And if not, then we need to fix that. So, and I know that Trump is really worried this is a trap laid for him. I'm sure it is. But let's set that aside and ask about the rest of us and whether our country can continue on the same basis that we assumed we were living under, which is again, one of equal justice under the law. So, can you just go through some of the questions? And I think both of us are trying to be really responsible and fact-based here. Clearly, there's nonsense in this document dump. Don't want to get trapped by it. Don't want to fall for it. Okay, but on the basis of things that we can say with some certainty are true or seem to be true, what are the questions that you, having gone through this for several days now, think that we should be asking, following up on?
Well, there's questions for a lot of different people, and some of them are more serious and some of them are maybe less serious. One of the biggest ones in many ways is, how did we let Bill Gates be in charge of the medical decisions of our entire nation when apparently he was trying to slip antibiotics to his wife secretly because he transferred sexually transmitted diseases from hookers on Jeffrey Epstein's islands to her? That is insane. And when you look back at the absolutely just the crime against humanity that COVID was, and you realize who Bill Gates is and who he's exposed to be in these emails, that's atrocious. But that's less of a question we need to ask,
but
and more of a person we need to just forget about forever. Right?
Well, first of all, I just bless you for saying that, and you put it so well. This is the guy who is making health decisions for the entire world, and apparently from these emails, he's trying to slip a drug into his wife's drink because he infected her with a venereal disease from a Russian hooker. So yeah, I mean, that's just amazing. Thank you for saying that. It's amazing.